Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about something interesting. The perspective of winners and losers in the Ukraine conflict, and that's going to get kind of complicated. Let's talk. Well, let me see if I can straighten this out a little bit. It's a holiday weekend here in the US, so there are a lot of people who are chilling out, probably don't have time to waste their Saturday night watching me run off at the Yap, but it's what I like to do, so let's go. Winners and losers in Ukraine, right? And and I think it's okay to say that. There are those who will say, "Oh my God, you can't have that kind of a cynical discussion. People are dying, people are being killed." True. But the fact of the matter is, it is what it is. And whenever there is a conflict, in the certainly the people who are getting maimed and injured in the conflict are the losers. But of course, there's a lot going on, particularly with this conflict, because this conflict, remember, this is not about Russia. This conflict is about the U.S. empire observing its power wane, observing the rise of Russia and China and even other countries, India, Brazil, etc. And the U.S. empire is saying we've got to crack down, and we must first and foremost. What is this about? It's about weakening Russia and subsequently weakening China, right? We got to weaken Russia first, then weaken China. It's really a sick and twisted way to view the world, if you think about it. Those who see their ultimate goal as maintaining power and maintaining control of the world, and the fact that other countries are rising, the fact that there are multiple dynamics that are coming into play, such as BRICS and other things that are coming into play, the revolutions that are happening in Africa, are demonstrating that the U.S. empire is trying to hold on to something that's slippery. It's like trying to hold on to a grease steel. You're never going to be able to hold on to it, and they're trying to hold on to power when the fact of the matter is no country in the history of humanity has ever been able to hold on to power forever. It just goes sooner or later. And in the age of technology, technological advancements, and people being able to move all over the world, the life of an empire is going to be much, much shorter. So the U.S. empire is trying to hold on to power. And let's talk about the losers for starters. Certainly, it's obvious the Ukrainians. When I use the word Ukraine, right? Apparently, the so-called Western supporters of Ukraine, when they use the term Ukraine, what they're not talking about are the people of Ukraine. They're talking about some ideology, democracy, freedom, independence, sovereignty. They're talking about all of these kinds of words, right? Words that don't apply to dead people. Here's the bottom line: sovereignty, democracy, independence. Those are words that apply to people who are alive. They don't apply to people who are dead. And unfortunately, a significant number of Ukrainians and a rising number of Ukrainians are falling into the latter category. So very early in the conflict, had there been concern about Ukrainians, whoever was concerned about Ukrainians would have said, well, one thing we got to do, make sure that a lot of Ukrainians don't die. Because how could we argue that they're going to have sovereignty and democracy and things like that if they're dead? So we've got hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians dying, and we've got people arguing that somehow they're achieving some great feat by dying. I think the only thing they're really achieving is dying. So the first group of people that have lost are the dead, but there are people who are getting something even worse. And that is, if you're dead, okay, your worries are over, as they say. That's it, you're done. But because this is a war and it is an artillery war, that means that there's hot metal flying all over the place. So what you have is people sometimes who weren't fortunate enough who die. Sometimes I saw a picture of a show of this Ukrainian soldier who they had stuff wrapped around him. He was blinded and like some of his limbs were blown off. So you have people who, I mean, let's face it, you got guys that got their testicles blown off, their limbs blown off, they're blinded, something went off near them, they've lost their hearing. And I'm not saying I'm sure there's Russians the same way, but there are people who are alive who are horribly disfigured, horribly injured for life, and their families who got to take care of them when they get home. And what you're going to have in Ukraine is a crippled country. You're going to have a country. I mean, the number of dead tells you that at minimum twice that number is injured, but probably somewhere more like 3 or 4 times that many are injured. So you're going to have literally millions of people before this thing is said and done. We're probably at 1 million injured already, dead and wounded, probably pushing towards those numbers, dead and wounded, if you count all of your injuries, mental injuries, emotional injuries, right? So it's going to be very, very difficult. So Ukraine is really, add this, people have left the country, don't want to come back. They don't really have an economy now. How can you really have an economy when you're getting bombed flat, when half the time you don't have electricity, et cetera? And now, apparently, they're going to do another mobilization, which means they're going to take all the young and not so young men that they can, and they're going to drag them to the front, and they're going to get wiped out too, because let's face it, they're sending you to fight with little or no training. And if they got all of these people, they're not going to be able to properly equip them with weapons, which means they're just throwing more bodies to the front to be massacred. Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, when I use the term Ukraine, it to the neocons, what Ukraine is, it is a knife that they have sharpened to jab at Russia's throat. That's what it is to the neocons. That's what it is to the people who are pushing this thing. To the Ukrainians, it's their lives. And a lot of them don't have a life anymore. And a lot of them are in bad, bad shape. And then you have the women and children and people home who are waiting in hell. I guess if it's up to the neocons, they'll send them next. So at the end of this thing, what are you going to have? Add this. They've lost significant portions of their country. They've lost port cities. They've lost so much and stand to lose much, much more. And so, number one loser are the people of Ukraine who this will never recover, who will never recover from this. And what we'll see over the course of history, look, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Ukraine, Austria, there's different empires, things and things like that. Over the course of history, the borders in Eastern Europe have moved. They've moved again for starters because Russia has claimed the area of Ukraine where Russian speakers live. And they may end up taking more of Ukraine. I suspect at some point, Hungary, you have an area in Ukraine in the mountains where there are a lot of Hungarians. I suspect at some point, Ukraine, when it collapses, the Hungarians will likely move in to protect the ethnic Hungarians. The Poles will probably start looking at Western Ukraine, but they got issues there. They got issues there because there is a Banderite ideology in Western Ukraine. And if they want that, they may, at some point, the Russians may say, you want Ukraine, Western Ukraine, you can have it. I don't think they're there now. But the bottom line is Belarus may have something to say about that. But long and short of it is, if Poland takes Western Ukraine, I don't think it's going to be a win for them because they've got an ideology there that hates Poles that would just as happy genocide them as they would Jews or Russians or any other group that they think are Untermenschen, less than human. Any way you look at it, Ukraine's just going to get torn to pieces in the end. The people that are gone to Western Europe are never going to want to come back. And the people of Ukraine are the first and foremost winners. Gee, thanks, United States. You came here to bring us sovereignty and independence and all of those things. In reality, the United States came to Ukraine to sharpen an entire country up just like a knife and to jab at Russia with it. And when you try to use a weapon against a superpower, that weapon is going to be taken from you. It is going to be taken from you. And you're going to be beaten with your own weapon at some point. And so I think that, unfortunately for Ukraine, their situation is dire and it ain't going to get no better. And at some point, I believe, and there are a lot of people, the US wants to get in, NATO wants to get in. You are what your record says you are. NATO's record, the U.S. empire's record, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Russia, you name it. I mean, excuse me, whether it's Vietnam, you name it. They get in a fight, and when the going gets tough, the tough get going. They get out of there. They leave. At some point, I believe the U.S. empire will leave the Ukrainians high and dry and get the hell out of there and to try to move to their next adventure. Let's move to the next big loser, the European people. You notice, I think that it is important that when I talk about losers and winners, that I don't just say that Europe lost or Europe won, Ukraine lost, Ukraine won. Because in the context of Ukraine, let's face it, the oligarchs are winning. Um, if in the unlikely event that he gets out of this alive, Zelensky's pilfered a lot of loot. You got a lot of Ukrainian oligarchs and leaders of the country that have been shaking down everybody for loot, man. This thing is a big money laundering deal. And so you've got some very powerful people in Ukraine who, if they get out of this thing alive, has stashed a lot of money in shell companies around the world. So that's why I say the Ukrainian people, the average working class schmuck, all he gets is kidnapped out of a nightclub, sent to the front lines and mangled with artillery or killed. So but the oligarchs are going to make out like kings and queens. The only question is, will they get away with it? We shall see. Let's go to Europe. The people of Europe, in a way, let me say one thing that's good about the people of Europe, at least those who have enough sense to realize it. Not all of them do. You still got some idiots running around with blue and yellow flags, watching their world collapse around them. But one of the things that the Europeans have found out, and let me just say this, you cannot act on your problems until you understand your problems. If you're asleep, you can't act on them. You have to wake up. I believe one of the things that have happened is a lot of Europeans have been woken up to the reality that they have no sovereignty, that they have no independence, that Europe is not a collection of nations. Europe is a collection of vassal states that have no independence and sovereignty, and that their leaders will do whatever they're told. That if their leaders are told to destroy their own country, that their leaders will do it. They have no sovereignty. I mean, let's look at Germany. Do you really have to look at Germany? Olaf Scholz comes to DC. He stands next to Biden, and Biden says, we'll take out Nord Stream. And this idiot next to me won't say a damn word. And Olaf Scholz just sits there like, we're going to work things out together, me and Joe. And then they take out Nord Stream. And then Olaf Scholz just sits there with the same stupid look on his face. I wonder who did it. Must be the Russians, maybe some Ukrainians in a sailboat. The ruling elite in Europe have been exposed, and that's a good thing. The Europeans have been going around all the way since 1945 thinking that Europe was a continent with countries, individual countries, and that they were voting people in. And these people were going to pay attention to them. Annalena Baerbock came out and said it earlier. I don't care what the voters think. That's what she said. We don't care what the voters. Get out of here, the voters. There's an illusion that they're voting. They ain't really voting. The U.S. empire is going to pick the leaders. The U.S. empire is going to tell us what to do. And those voters, we ain't interested in them at all. They aggravate us. What the people of Europe have found, those who have eyes, have found that they have leaders who don't work for them, who work for the U.S. empire, that they're unoccupied, that, let's face it, Western Europe is just occupied. It's occupied by the U.S. empire, and it's the same dynamic that they do to Africa. And that is, they get some old a backstabbing traitor. They give this dude lots of money, and they get him to make sure that, all the uranium and gold and stuff, cobalt and all of these things that they need for their Tesla batteries come out at a very low cost, next to nothing. And if anybody opens their mouth, they massacre them. That's the way they do it in Africa. Well, guess what? Europe thought they were somehow better than Africa, that the U.S. empire viewed them better. You mean nothing to them. So now what Europe has found out is they got a bunch of rich, spoiled, quisling traders who are working for the U.S. empire, just like that's why the Africans are throwing out some of the countries. Niger, they realize we got a guy in charge who doesn't work for us, and he's taking us to the cleaners, and we're all going to be poor, and he's going to be rich, and the people in the U.S. empire are rich. So the Africans are wise enough to recognize the dynamics. The Europeans have it in front of their face if they got enough eyes to see. If they have enough eyes to see what's going on, it has been revealed to them. If they don't see what's going on and act on it, when they're going to get what's coming to them. I think that Europe is screwed economically, but Europe has a chance. If the people of Europe wake up and revolt against the traitors that are running them, but the evidence is there now. All I'm saying is it's a win for the European people, even though their economy is going to hell and they're being betrayed by their leaders, but there is a win because they have a bit of knowledge. This was inevitable. It was inevitable. Since they didn't have sovereignty, it was inevitable that sooner or later the U.S. empire was going to look at Europe and say, we can't get cheap resources like we used to from Africa. Bad news. You guys are guess what? You're the new Africa. And let me tell you something. When they get finished with you guys, you'll be just as poor as the old Africa if you let them do it. So the European people have information. They should have the knowledge. Some of them are still idiots running around with a blue and yellow flag, but we shall see. But they have that information they didn't have. I think another big loser, a big winner is the Russian people. Why is that? Look, if I'm walking through the forest and there's a threat, right? What kind of threat do I want? Do I want a threat that makes a lot of noise and lets me know it's there so I can alter course? Or do I want a quiet, stalking threat that's going to wait and jump from behind a tree and get me? Do I want a rattlesnake that's going to rattle and make noise before I get to it and I can back up and go another way? Or do I want a copperhead that's going to lay there and I'm not making any noise, and when I step on him, he's going to grab me on the leg, right? I prefer the one that makes noise. So my point is this. Well, I say all that to say this. The Russian people, a lot of them wanted to integrate with the West. They felt as though the people in the West were like, oh, it's cool. Beverly Hills is cool. The French Riviera is cool. You had all of these oligarchs and wealthy people from Russia moving to London, putting their money in London, buying soccer clubs. So the Russians thought, well, we're rich. Russian, so we can go to be with Russia, and the Russian women are like, we're pretty girls, and we can go around the Western world and be pretty and enjoy all the pretty girl stuff, right? The Russians felt like they were just other Europeaners who could go around and be welcome, and the liberals in Russia thought that they could align with the liberals in the West, and all would be well. Now they're finding out the truth, that the West are a bunch of racist bastards and they hate them, that they are the Africans of Europe as far as the Europeans are concerned. I remember watching this thing where there was some woman on TV in Germany, and she was literally saying, the Russians aren't European. They look European. She might as well have said they smell European, but they don't taste like Europeans because they're not. They're lower than us. The fact that she was saying they're not Europeans, what she was really saying is there is a hierarchy in this world and Europeans at the top. And though they may be white and look similar to us, they're not part of this hierarchy. They're still a notch below us at minimum. They're down there with the darky people, right? That's basically what she was saying. And they revealed. Now, we were told these are the conservatives. Why? The conservatives are a bunch of racist scumbags that we must all hate, right? But the liberals now, they're standing up for everybody. People, they got rainbow flags, for God's sakes. They got Black Lives Matter masks. How could these possibly people be racist? But when it comes down to it, the most racist people of all are the liberals. When it comes down to it, they get it that when they got a group to hate, man, the Russians are their group to hate. The Chinese next. Ain't nobody can hate like the liberals, dude. Nobody can hate like them. They despise everything. They're going to risk the whole world in going up in flames because they hate a group so bad. So the Russian people found something out, and this is what they found out. In the racist, liberal, neoliberal world of Western, what I will call fascism, ultra liberal fascism, they are viewed like the Africans and the Chinese, that they're not allowed to be white. They're the black folks of Europe. That's the reality. They learned that, and that these people will never like them. That they cannot say we're liberals and you're liberals, so hey, let's all be friends. We're all liberals. I don't care if you're a liberal in Russia. You're still a Russian. No matter what you are. So the Russian people learned, look, they hate them they learned that there is a touch of the German Nazi all throughout the West. that German Nazi thing. That's why they align so well with the Nazis in Ukraine, because they got a little bit of it in them. And all it takes is the right circumstances for it to come out. And there you go. The Russians and the Chinese are growing technologically, economically, diplomatically. They're growing. And they looked at it and they just said, you people aren't Europeans. You ain't allowed to do that. And then when the special military operation said, they literally said it. They literally said all the things that they told us that conservatives and right wingers, well, that would only come out of their mouths because they're a bunch of racist pigs. And the liberals were like, yeah, we'd expect that in Afghanistan, those people over there, but in Europe, these people are Christians. These people are like us. That we'd expect it with those people. Well, really, but who's bombing those people? We are. But no wonder we'd expect it with the Afghans. We're the ones bombing them. But we wouldn't expect that people this right here, they'd be attacked. Well, wait a minute. What about Serbia? What about when you attacked them? What about you think they didn't expect it? No, the reality was what they're saying is we are in control of things. We decide who we are, that NATO, that the US empire is the ultimate arbiter of violence. See, in a society, the government is supposed to be the one that has if we're honest about it, let's be honest about this. The government is the one who has the ultimate right to use violence and decide who can use violence, right? The government can say, look, they can pass a law that says you can protect your home with a gun, or you can kill somebody, or that can go through the courts. The government can can designate you the authority. In the US, there's a legal precedent called the castle doctrine. Every man's home is his castle. And that basically says if somebody comes into your house uninvited, if somebody comes in and threatens you, or you believe they're threatening you, you can use lethal force against the person. So if somebody comes and breaks in my house, I can shoot him, I can kill him, I can hit him over the head with a bowling trophy, I can use lethal force against them, right? And so we have this. So they designate the right to use lethal force to me under those circumstances. Other than that, who can't? Police officers can use it. That's the government. Um, so the police can use it. The army can use it. What the government says is we're in charge and we can decide who can use force, who can use violence, who can use lethal force. That's what the government says. What the U.S. empire is saying to Russia, when people say, well, how can you say, oh, Russia can't invade another country? This is terrible. They invaded another country. Look at all the countries you invaded. For God's sake, how can you say that? At the same time, Ron DeSantis literally said, hey, if I become president, I'm going to bomb the crap out of Mexico because there's drug cartels there. After they will just say, you can't attack your neighbor. And people will say, where is that hypocrisy? No. Remember something, it is not to them. For this reason, in the same way that they believe that the government has a monopoly on violence and force, the government's the only one. The police, the military are the only ones legally that can use force, or the government can designate that to you and say you can use force to protect your house or particular things, right? In the same way, the U.S. empire believes it's the government of the world. So the U.S. empire will invade a country and say, you can't invade a country, Russia. They'll attack a country, Russia, China, you can't attack it. Nobody can. Why? Because we have the monopoly on force. And we use force. Yes, we can, because we're the government of the world. Not only does the U.S. empire use force, the U.S. empire decides who else has the right to use force. They didn't give permission to Russia to use force. In fact, they explicitly said you're not allowed to use force. So they're angry at Russia. So it's nothing hypocritical to them because they believe that they are the government of the world. And Russia has demonstrated something. So the U.S. empire has a loss here. Russia has demonstrated something, that the U.S. is no longer the government of the world. If they ever were, they sure as hell ain't now, because there is a country that says you do not have the monopoly on force, and I will use force against your proxies if necessary. Not only will I use force, I will use force against your proxies if necessary. So the U.S. empire lost. The people of Europe, I think, were freed to see the reality of their circumstance, and the people of Russia were freed to see that the Europeans and the liberals of the East don't like them, and that they're racist bastards, and they see them as lesser. And now that the Russian people can see the reality of that, they can understand, I believe, that their destiny is in other parts of the world. Hey, look, if you don't like me, I'll be friends with people that do. The Muslim world loves the Russians. The Asians love the Russians. Latin America loves the Russians. God knows the Africans love the Russians. So you know what the Russians can do? They can tell the Europeans and the liberals in the East, I mean, in the West, to go straight to hell and go on about their business. They don't have to waste their time anymore trying to be friends with people that never want to be friends with them. The only thing they want here is to steal everything you got. The same thing that the liberals want everywhere else. The same thing that not just the liberals, but the same thing that the imperialists, the same thing that the U.S. empire and France and the colonial powers want. They want to steal everything that ain't nailed down. That's what they want to do to Russia. And now Russia has got the Russian people, the Russian government don't have to try anymore to be friends with people that hate them. So that is a freeing experience, right? They are freed from a false reality that there's somehow something they can do to be friends with the US or Germany or whoever. To hell with them. Go on about your business. Tell them, move on. We're going in a different direction. Thanks. Been nice knowing you. See, you wouldn't want to be you. So that really freed the Russians. Let's go to the Middle East, such as Saudi Arabia, the Muslim countries. Again, same kind of thing in a way. And that is the U.S. empire has been just in their region, destabilizing their region, bombing people. The France, look, Syria, Libya, Lebanon. France has been in the Middle East, robbing and stealing people and doing all kinds of empire and colonial kind of crap. And now I see with BRICS, with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran moving in the direction of the Eurasian coalition, that the Muslim countries, I think, have a chance to be a part of a coalition that will allow them to be what they want to be. The United States has exacerbated deliberately the rift between the Arabs and the Persians, the Sunnis and the Shia, however you choose to view it, right, or state it. The U.S. has did what it does. It goes into a region, it finds out who's at war with each other, it gets in the middle of that war, it supports one side, and it keeps the war going, it keeps the chaos going, it keeps the enmity between various groups going, right? They go into that area, they go to China, and they say, oh, Japan, you and South Korea, you really don't like China. Why don't you join us against China, right? They try to separate and cause friction between groups, and they try to take advantage of that friction and turn that into chaos. And then they try to weaponize the friction and the anger that the people have against each other. I think the Muslim world is waking up, and they've decided that, hey, man, this is not the direction for us. You're destabilizing our region. We've had enough of your U.S. bases and bombs and war in our region. We want you out. Clearly, I don't even have to talk about the Africans, do I? Now, keep in mind something. In the global south, be it Africa, be it Latin America, are they going to take it hard as far as food prices going up and things of that nature? Yes, they are. They're going to have some difficulty there. The world is. It's going to get worse. But I think the other thing that's happening in Africa is that they are shaking off the chains of the colonial powers. And so Ibrahim Traore, the leader of Burkina Faso, he just, to me, he asked a question. And when that question was answered, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. The question he asked was, why is it that we have so many natural resources? Why is it we have all of these riches and we're going around the world begging people for stuff and we're poor? When he asked that question, and that question spread throughout Africa, he opened Pandora's box, because the African people can never go back to just giving up their natural resources and get nothing in return, because they have asked the question, why are we so poor when we are so rich? And the answer is because they're being robbed. And the African people now, because, see, here's the thing, the dynamic of Ukraine, the dynamic of the dramatic and draconian sanctions against Russia allows China to see what's in their future, and allows Russia and China to both say our future is to assist Africa, Latin America, etc., to assist the other parts of the world to help build their economy so that they'll be our customer base, to help build their economy so that we can do trade with them and we don't need the United States and we don't need the West. So it's really been good for the Africans and the Latin Americans in the short term. Are they going to pay more for food? Yes. Are they going to have some problems in the short term and some instability? Yes. But let's face it, look at what their lives were being. If you look at these pictures from these cobalt mines and stuff in Mali, and these people were virtually slaves and they were getting nothing in return. This gives them an opportunity in the same way that the Europeans have the opportunity to wake up and realize that their country is being run by vassals. Here's what I'll say. Do the Europeans have this as much cojones? Do they have as much guts as the Africans? The Africans are looking at this saying, "The hell with this! We're overthrowing our governments, and we're going to put in the government that we want." I wonder if the Europeans have the guts to do what the Africans are do. Right? The Africans are like, man, screw this, man. I've had enough of this crap. This guy's got to go. And they're just like, wake up one day and there's a coup and they say, hey man, whatever you're going to do, West, take your best shot, but we've had enough. We can't go on any longer with this. The question is, will the Europeans have the cojones to do what the Africans do? Will they have the knowledge? Will they have the revolutionary spirit to stand up to the ruling elite and say, no more? You're not taking us into poverty. You're not robbing us blind. You're not working for the U.S. empire. We voted you in. And guess what? If you're not going to do it, then you're going out of power and we're going to put somebody in power who will. Do the Europeans have the get up and go that the people of West Africa have? Well, so far they haven't shown me a damn thing, but maybe they will. At least they have an opportunity now. So the Africans, while some of the more oppressed, shall we say, in impoverished parts of the world are going to have some issues paying more for, or having issues paying more for food. There's an option right now. There's an opportunity. And over the course of the medium term, 10 years, 15, 20 years out, there's now opportunities for their countries to do absolute U-turns. Oh, excuse me. The American people, good and bad, as far as losers or winners. The American people, in a way, are losing because their country's going straight to hell. I mean, all you have to do is look at what's happening in Maui. Look what happened in East Palestine. Fires, trains overturning. And what do we see? A U.S. government that's like, screw these damn people. Oh my God, you want things. You want us to fix trains that turned over and spread chemicals all into your environment, and you're all going to get cancer and terrible things, and you expect us to deal with it? Ain't happening. Maui, fires all over the place. The people are suffering. Oh, you want us to come bail you out? Yeah, not happening. We got more money to go to Ukraine. So this is a wake-up call for America. America is starting to realize that it's falling apart. We're looking around at absolute disasters. Let me see something. Let me show you something. Let me see. So America gets to see the ugly monster of its imperial government for what it really is. Let me see. One second. Let me show you America for what it really is. We're putting billions of dollars, right? Billions and billions of dollars are going to so-called Ukraine, right? Let's look at America for what it really is. This is America. Right now, this is America with billions of dollars going to weapons, right? Look at these people. You got people living in tents. They got nothing. You got people angry, probably mentally ill. You got people who have, all kind of addiction problems. This is the country that I live in right now. Look at that. That's the country that we live in. That's the country that look at that. It's dirty and filthy. The people are poor. The people have nothing. The people are living on the street. Graffiti everywhere. Stores closed. Desperation. Drug abuse, mental illness. That's America. And will America do anything to try to change the position that those people find themselves in? Look at this guy. It looks like he's talking to himself, probably mental illness. People just look like they have nothing to live for. You know, look at this. Those of us who have lived in America for many, many years, did we ever think that we get to a point where, we just saw this in this country? I'll tell you right now, let me be honest. 10 years ago, America didn't look like this. This is a result of neoliberalism. This is all these people have. They can't live, they can't afford, and you can't say, oh, well, they're this race or that race. They're white, they're black, they're everything. They're desperate. And you can say, oh, well, attack them. Oh no, they're lazy, they're this, they're that. Well, how come they weren't lazy 10 years ago? How come 10 years ago? Just 10 mere years ago, you'd never see that. You would 10 years ago, you would never see that. Where were these people? 10 years ago, you know where they were? They had jobs. 10 years ago, they had houses. 10 years ago, they could put a roof over their head. Now, let me tell you one of the things that happens when people get on the street and they get in sheer desperation, they'll drown their sorrows in alcohol and drugs, and then it just spirals out of control. That's it. Tent after tent, people just trying to look at that on the painting on people's houses, and these are people walking down the street. Just think, if you live and you're not in that position, you have your kids walking to school, walking to the bus stop. You got to walk up and down the street, and this is what you're walking between. So at night, there are people just leaning against each other. This looks like a movie. It's so bad. Then think about this. After what just happened in Hawaii, nothing for that. These people. After the people in Hawaii, nothing. This is America, man. This is what this place has become. So can we say that our government is protecting us from something? Are they protecting us from terrorism? Are they protecting us from the violence of Putin or Xi or somebody like that? Is that who's going to come do terrible things to us? Who's protecting these people? Just poverty and desperation. That's what it is. That's what we got here. That's what we're looking at. So my point is, if you want to buy some rockets, or if you want to send some more tanks or F-16s or things worth tens or hundreds of millions to Ukraine, they got money for it. Look at that. The streets are just filthy. Everything's filthy. America's just turned into just a filthy, stinking, miserable, rotten place. Okay. So the American people now get to see that they have a government that doesn't work for them, that doesn't give a damn about them. We do have some presidential candidates who are talking about the problems. Luckily, again, I'm not saying that all of them are great or wonderful. You got RFK Jr. RFK Jr. saying some wonderful things, and he's saying some things that make you want to bop him in the head with a baseball bat sometimes. Some of the things that he says are just the prattle of the ruling elite, and then a lot of the other things he says are great when it comes to foreign policy. That's a reality. It is what it is. But I think it's good that RFK Jr. is at least in the mix, saying we got to close the bases. You got Cornel West saying a lot of good stuff. We got to close the bases. We got to put an end to this. You got Trump out there who they're trying to do in, but Trump is, for all of his flaws and some of the boneheaded crap that he says, you still got Trump saying some things about at least ending the Ukraine war, stopping war, not going. I mean, Trump, for as horrible as his imperialist foreign policy is, he's got enough sense to know we should not probably get killed. We shouldn't, destroy the entire world in a nuclear holocaust. So you do have a conversation that's starting to happen in the United States. I think that's important, and I think that's a win, because here's the truth. Where we are now was inevitable. We have crazy neocons in charge, and it was inevitable that they were going to do what crazy neocons do and get us here. So now that we're here, it's obvious and it's clear. The people can see it. What they're going to do, I don't know. I think Neocons have been forced; their hands have been forced. That's what the censorship is about. They've got to censor people because they can't. They got their lie is getting so obvious and blatant, and it's falling apart that they got to censor people. The EU just recently passed some laws and some rules that are going to be dramatically increasing censorship, and that's going to again, it's going to. These things are dramatic. It's terrible, but sometimes you got to hit somebody over the head to wake them up. And so these terrible things, these fascist and totalitarian moves that the U.S. empire and its vassals are making may wake some people up. They're definitely waking some people up. Who else are winners? In an interesting and unique kind of way, there is a winner in America when it comes. The American people are winners when it comes to the mainstream media. I tell you why. Because we're seeing the rise of alternative media. We're really seeing the rise of alternative media now. All the people more and more and more are going to alternative media. They're realizing they're being lied to. The numbers are falling dramatically. CNN's numbers are falling. Fox couldn't take it anymore. Tucker Carlson was touching on some things. He stood on one too many times. He stood on the third rail, whether it was Julian Assange or Ukraine, and Fox finally had to fire him. The system said fire him. They fired him. And he moved out into the alternative space, and he's been getting some really insane numbers. And Fox has been losing, they've been leaving Fox in a hurry. So they got rid of their number one guy. And the reason they got rid of their number one guy, because it wasn't even ever really about ratings, and it wasn't about him being the number one guy. The most important thing is that they maintain the narrative of the U.S. empire and the neocons. He wasn't willing to do it. He was stepping on third rails. He had to go. Good. So one of the winners, I think, of the Ukraine, believe it or not, let me state this a different way. One of the winners of Ukraine is alternative media, because they censored people so much that we have the rise of Rumble, the rise of Rockfin, the rise of, so particularly Rumble and Rockfin are growing exponentially. So people win when alternative media grows, because now they have places that they can go that won't be censored, and the people win, and the alternative media platforms win because they grow, they make money, they continue to grow. And at some point, we're going to cross over an edge, right? Right now, you've got X amount of numbers of people viewing CNN, MSNBC, Fox, etc., right? We're going to cross a number. I don't know if we're already there, where there's going to be more people watching Jimmy Dore and George Galloway and Garland Nixon and Viva Free and all of these other, the Duran, you name it, the Gray Zone, Caleb Maupin, on and on and on, whichever one you like, right? Breakthrough News. The time may already be here, but the time is definitely coming when there'll be far more people watching alternative news than there will be mainstream news. And the mainstream news will be putting out this stupid, ignorant propaganda, but people won't see it because they'll be watching alternative news. And if YouTube throws us off, who cares? We'll be on Rockfin, we'll be on Rumble. We got options. We got options. So I think that alternative news has won as a result, and I think it's as a direct result of the Ukraine conflict, because very early it was obvious that the system, the U.S. empire, is desperate to maintain its narrative. It can't have people talking about the Minsk Accords in 2014 and Victoria Nuland's, Jeffrey Pyatt's phone call and things like that. So they had to start doing more and more censorship. The more censorship they did, between that and COVID, more censorship they did, the more people that exited the alternative platforms, got accustomed to alternative platforms. The growth of alternative media, I think, is directly related first to COVID, because there were people who had questions and they just weren't allowed to ask them. They weren't allowed to ask them on mainstream media. They went somewhere that they could. And then, of course, the same thing happened with the special military operation, whatever you want to call it, the Ukraine conflict. And that was, people had questions, they weren't allowed to ask them. They migrated to alternative media. And now the alternative media is benefiting greatly, is growing. I think that's a fantastic thing. The big losers in Europe, I think, are the biggest losers in Europe. I mean, outside of the Ukrainians, because they're actually getting killed, and Russians that are getting killed. The big losers I think, also are the liberal ruling class of Europe. They're going to pay. They're going to pay, and they're going to pay dearly for this one. Oh, they're going to pay for this one. And they're going to pay in that the people of Europe are going to move in the direction, I think, initially of they'll take whatever nationalism they can get. Because remember, when people say nationalism, they just think of one thing. Oh, nationalism, that's evil. There are various strains of nationalism. And a particular strain of nationalism is similar to the strain I always say in South America, where people say, look, we love our country and we want our country to be our country, and we don't want to go running around the world starting trouble. There's a nationalism. I think Putin's a nationalist. One could argue in a way that I'm a nationalist in a way, in that the kind of person that says why we should, a lot of people, we should take care of our people. And if we got anything left over, we can help someone else. But the idea that we got to go around the world, giving everybody else money for wars, infiltrating other people's governments, throwing all this money all over the world as we can't even fill a pothole or take care of, people living in filth on the streets, in tents, and we can't even deal with fires and hurricanes and things that our people are going through. The kind of people that I think are going to come to power in Europe are the people who are going to say, we're sick and tired of NATO. We're sick and tired of that foolishness. We want jobs. We want our trains to run on time. We want our infrastructure to be good. Unfortunately, some of Europe, particularly France, ain't going to recover. France is done, I think, because France has an opportunity not to be done. But the reality is, France has been, it's coming out, they've been so predatory. I mean, in a way, France is lost in this conflict because of what's happened in Europe. There were a lot of people that didn't know just how predatory that France was on West Africa. And there are a lot of people that, as a result of this conflict and West Africa starting to revolt, there are people like, holy crap, I didn't know that France was stealing every damn thing that wasn't nailed down in West Africa. So France, this idea that, yeah, yes, we're a bunch of guys running around with berets and a skinny mustache, eating baguettes, and we're nice people. Yeah, they may be, but your government is parasitic, and your government's robbing the hell out of the West African people and keeping them in poverty, interfering with their governments, overthrowing their governments, and keeping puppets in. Well, the world is learning about that. Bad for you, France, because you're not going to be able to. You live such a parasitical existence off of the gold and uranium and all the other stuff from West Africa. You're gonna have to pay a fair price for it, and having to pay a fair price for that, you ain't gonna be able to live like you did. I will say this: there are those in the West, the neocons, who want some kind of war in Africa, right? Oh no, we can't allow the Africans to like sell their own stuff and keep their own money. We got to do that. We got to steal that from them. We got to continue to rob them blind. So the plan is, we'll go over there and start a war in West Africa. Well, let me tell you something, dudes and dudettes. Can you imagine if, let's say, they start this war in West Africa, and so it's Niger and it's Senegal, it's blah blah blah, but on the other side, Mali, Algeria, Burkina Faso, on and on and on, say no, and now you've got a gigantic regional war in West Africa. How many African refugees do you think are going to show up in Europe? 10 million, 20 million? Can you imagine 10, 20 million West Africans showing up in Europe? No food, don't speak the language, looking around, starving. Once again, because the neocons went to their country and started a war. Meanwhile, the situation unraveling in Ukraine, and you got, millions of Ukrainians from the east flooding into the Western Europe. So you got 10, 20 million West Africans, they're coming in from one side. You got another couple million Ukrainians, they're flooding in from the other side. How do you think that's going to fare for Europe? Collapse. Europe cannot afford that. Collapse, cultural collapse. There'll be cultural clashes from the people from West Africa who are there to survive, but their culture is very, very different. Even the people from Eastern Europe and Ukraine, they're coming in. They're going to bring some bad stuff. Trust me. You got some people who have a very questionable ideology in that area, and they will bring that ideology to your town. And might I add, the United States has pumped more weapons than a few in Ukraine, and they'll be bringing some of them with them. And some of their fights between various criminal gangs will come to your hometown. So If they get what they want in Africa and they destabilize Africa, man, the Africans are flooding into Europe, flooding big time, and they ain't ever going to want to leave. And how you going to get rid of 20 million people and another five, six, seven, eight, nine, whatever from Eastern Europe? So um, Europe is dangling on the edge of total and absolute destruction and annihilation in every single possible way. How Europe gets out of this, I don't know. Because, see, the only way that Europe really gets out of this is to change their leaders. If they keep the traitors that they got running things, there's no way out of it. I mean, if you've got a traitor running your country, a traitor is going to do what traitors do. It's going to trade, I guess. I don't know. But you get the point. They're going to stab you in the back. Well, they got traitors. If they leave the traitors in Europe, there's no way to fix this because they're not working on your side. They're working for the U.S. empire. So if the Europeans can wake up and get rid of the traitors running their government, yeah, they'll be okay. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. Things might have to go a lot worse before they get better. Um, definitely the Chinese are big winners here, big winners. Now, the U.S. empire wants a confrontation with China. How stupid and foolish they are, but that's what they are, and they're unable to do it. What has happened is the U.S. empire has telegraphed to China what they want to do in Taiwan, but they've also telegraphed to Taiwan what they want to do to Taiwan. And I think one of the things that has happened is there is an element of people in Taiwan who are waking up saying, we don't want to be Ukraine. We don't want to be Ukraine. In fact, let me see if I can find the article. Taiwan. If I can find it. There was an article. There is another guy who wants to run for president in Taiwan. I don't know if I'll see it. Here we go. And this is let's look at this. Billionaire vows to stop Taiwan from becoming the next Ukraine. Foxconn founder Terry Gou has entered the Taiwanese presidential race, vowing to bring peace to the self-governing island. Right? He says Terry Gou, the founder of Apple's largest supplier, has entered the Taiwanese presidential race to bring peace with China. Listen to this, and prevent the self-governing island from becoming a geopolitical pawn in a bloody conflict with its larger neighbor. Taiwan must not become Ukraine, and I will not let Taiwan become the next Ukraine, Gu said in a speech. I implore the Taiwanese people to give me 4 years. I promise that I will bring 50 years of peace to the Taiwan island. He pledged to build a foundation of mutual trust with Beijing. So that's the other part of one of the things that's happening in Ukraine. Taiwan and other potential allies of the U.S. are looking at what's happening in Ukraine, and there are some sober minds in. So there are people in some of these allies and potential allies. Oh, you know what I better do? I better plug in my laptop in a hurry because I didn't plug it. I unplugged it. Let me see. Oh, there we go. I'm plugged back in. There we go. I'm not going to get cut off because God knows I'm down to 8%. Um, in demonstrating their treacherousness, in demonstrating their callous disregard for human life, the neocons have sent the message around the world to any potential allies of the U.S. that you're only an ally until we need you to be a suicide bomber. And then we'd be happy to strap a bomb onto you and throw you at our enemy and blow you the hell up. So I think that the people of Taiwan have a chance now because they were cannon fodder, and they still may be. I mean, and I got to say this. You're in Taiwan. Yes, you're being propagandized to know not what. But if you're damn stupid enough, that you're going to just say, hey, we saw what you did in Ukraine. Let's do the same thing. We want to be a battlefield between two nuclear superpowers. Yeah, just bring it on. How could that possibly go wrong? If you're damn stupid enough to do that, you know what? Then Taiwan should be gone. You know what I mean? It should be gone. I don't believe that it should. Nothing but love for the people of Taiwan. And the people of Taiwan deserve peace and democracy and diplomacy and all kind of things that end with CY, right? But look, man, if I watch a tractor trailer run over you and I stand in front of the same tractor trailer, it's just my time to go. I should be dead. And if the Taiwan people sit there and watch what the hell's happening in Ukraine and they think that the United States is arming them to step up and to save their democracy, they're going to get blown to hell. And that's what they got coming. They're asking it to get blown to hell. If you say to the U.S., if Beijing's next to, and the U.S. is like, yes, sir, we're going to do the same exact thing with that. The U.S. has said it. They've said, look, if there's a war in Taiwan, we'll blow TSMC up ourselves. We'll blow the hell out of Taiwan. We won't even wait for it. They've literally said that. So if the people of Taiwan are like, nah, we're going to go with a government that'll set us up to be exactly like like Ukraine, that they ought to have a government that'll do that. If that's their plan, if that's their game plan, that's what they ought to have. I think the good thing is China and Russia understand that they're dealing with a mad dog in these neocons, a frothing at the mouth, a mad rabid dog when it comes to Blinken and Newland and these people. These people can't be bargained with. You can't bargain with a mad dog, and that's Blinken, that's Newland, etc. That's Jake Sullivan. I think the Russians and the Chinese recognize that, and they realize that they have to be the cooler heads in this world. I think they realize that it's their responsibility to ensure that the world doesn't get blown up, and I think they've taken that responsibility on their backs. And so that's why I think it's going to be very difficult for the U.S. empire to coax China into taking Taiwan back by force. But God knows the U.S. empire is going to do everything they can to give it a shot. So that's how I see it. I could go on and on and on, but that's how I see it as far as winners and losers. Um, it's a matter of, I think the information war is big. I think it's a matter of people now, a year and a half into the special military operation, understanding the places that they need to go to get. I'm not going to use the word accurate information, but I'll say this: the alternative media's information may not be accurate. I'm not vouching for its accuracy, but what I'm saying is that the people in alternative media are striving for accuracy. At least they're striving for a different thought, a different idea, a different way to look at things. So I think that the big winner of the people, because of censorship, because of propaganda, there's a big win for people, and that is all kinds of new websites, all kinds of new options for you to listen to on YouTube, etc. I started the special military operation started in February. I think it was about April or May that I really started pushing again on YouTube, and I started making a lot more videos because I had a lot to say, and it wasn't being said in the mainstream media. I think that's what's going on. So that's a big one to me. That's a big one because the information sphere is critical because the U.S. empire is so desperate that it's doing so many things to try to mislead the people. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Let me look before we go. Let me look at the super chats because we always get lots of great questions and comments when it comes to super chats. So let's go. We're starting to run into them. Sparky, as always, Sparky says ECOWAS is nothing without Nigerian military. Nigeria's Western puppet, President Tinubu, may not have control over Nigeria's military, who aren't interested in invading Niger for neocolonialism. Good, very good comment. I think you're right. I think Sparky's onto something here. Sparky says, build a better world with BRICS. As always, Sparky's right. BRICS is huge. Again, the global South, as they call it, the oppressed nations, the colonialized nations are seeing, certainly in the future, I'm not saying BRICS is going to be able to do something today or tomorrow, but they're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Sparky says, make Ukraine rush again. Don't even leave a patch call Ukraine. Lest it be a NATO playground. Conan, thank you very much. Conan. Keep going. Is there any? Oh, here we go. How about Donald Smeed? Thanks a lot, Donald Smeed. What a great name. Donald Smeed. And I think that's it. Let's check on Rockfin. Rockfin, how about this? I Rose, thank you very much. I Rose. JVB, thank you. Um, JVB, devastating video, Garland, but totally true. Yeah, thanks a lot. Uh, Carolyn, thanks, thanks everybody. Yeah, that I think that video was important because I think people need to see. Thanks a lot, Eric Suarez. People need to see what America really looks like. You know, there are a lot of cities. Look, here's where people make mistakes, and I think you got to understand this. We got people in America who everything they try to assign to ideology, right? They say, "Oh, look at the cities in America, the blue controlled cities, they're a mess," as if that this is about Democrats and Republicans. I've been to Mississippi. Go drive through Mississippi. Go drive through some of the poor southern country states. The people are dirt poor. They got nothing. All kind of diseases. Third world abject poverty in some places throughout the South. They're run by Republicans. Then you go to the cities. The cities are supposed to be the jewels of the empire. When the cities are go falling apart, that means the empire's falling apart. And you go there, they're run by Democrats. They're a freaking disaster. The country is a disaster. If it suits you, you could try to blame the Democrats. Oh, well, they certainly look what they do. If it suits you, you can blame the Republicans. We live in a country of it's a neoliberal ideology. If they'd taken that money that we're using for 850 bases, that we're using to overthrow governments that's going into the pockets of all of these grifters for Ukraine, if we'd taken that money and invested it in our infrastructure, in school, in jobs, in housing, and things like that, that would help get rid of all of this. How about some beds for people who want rehab? How about some things like that? And we got the money to do it. The good news is we found the money to deal with homelessness and all these problems. The bad news is it's all gone to Lockheed Martin for bull crap in Ukraine. And even the so-called weapons in Ukraine are a fraud, because if you read what's going on, a lot of the so-called weapons going to Ukraine are simply on order. They simply say, can you build tanks for Ukraine? Yeah, good. Here's $20 billion. Here's $5 billion for building tanks for Ukraine. When do you think you'll have them built? Oh, 7 years, 8 years, good enough. And then when the Ukraine conflict is over, you think they're going to call them and say, give me my money back? No, they're not. They're going to say, keep it or build them or not. It's a grift. It's a money laundering operation. All right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, somebody says we don't get anything. We get the F-35. You're right. And you know what? It's crap. You know what a lot of pilots say about the F-35? It flies like a piano. Well, big news for you. Pianos don't fly. So it flies like a piano. Thanks a lot, everybody. Couple of things. If you can, you know, I am currently not on Twitter. I'm writing up my action to take against Twitter, but I'm currently not on Twitter. So I would very much appreciate it if you could share this on Twitter. Since I'm not on Twitter, share it on all your social media platforms. If you can afford, we got patreon.com, buy me a coffee, PayPal, Cash App. Don't forget, buy me a coffee now. You can do just like Patreon. Buy me a coffee. You can do monthly or whatever, right? Buy me a coffee is a great option. Check it out. Oh, last but not least, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. That is my alternative platform. If they throw me off YouTube tomorrow, you know where to find me. So go to my Rockfin channel. It doesn't cost anything to become a member. Please become a member of my Rockfin channel. And if you can afford it on my Rockfin channel, become a subscriber. It's $14.99 a month. And it is I think like $12.40 if you sign up for a year per month, because they give you a couple months free. If you can afford it, sign up to support my Rockfin channel. If you can't, just go over there and become a member. It doesn't cost a dime. Thanks a lot, everybody. Share on all your social media platforms. Smash the like button, please. Peace. I'm out.